Across the Americas lie some of the greatest unsolved mysteries on Earth, civilizations that rose, flourished, and vanished, leaving behind monuments carved in stone, aligned with the stars, and wrapped in riddles modern history has never fully explained. Most of us were never taught these stories. To us, these worlds feel distant, disconnected, fragments of a forgotten past. But what you are about to hear may change the way you see the ancient world forever. Let us begin with the story we were all taught. In the north, in the jungles of Mexico and Guatemala, history begins with the Olmec, a civilization so ancient that even archaeologists call them the mother culture. They carved colossal stone heads with features that seemed to belong to another world, and laid the foundations of mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and ritual that shaped every culture that followed. Centuries later came the Maya, architects of the forest, builders of stone observatories who mapped the heavens with astonishing precision, measuring time in cycles so vast they stretch beyond our historical imagination. Much later, the Aztec rose to power, building Tenochtitlan, a floating metropolis of canals, causeways, and gardens so advanced that the first Europeans who saw it believed they had stepped into a vision. This is the northern story. Far to the south, along the coast of Peru and the spine of the Andes, another timeline was unfolding. Here, in the Supe Valley, north of modern-day Lima, stands Caral, also known as Caral-Supe, the principal city of what archaeologists call the Norte Chico civilization. Over 5,000 years ago, ancient builders here raised monumental pyramids and ceremonial plazas at a time when civilization itself is supposed to have barely begun. They did so without pottery, without metal, without armies, weapons, or fortifications, and yet they built a city, planned, monumental, enduring. Caral-Supe should not exist. It contradicts the story we are taught about how civilization begins, and yet it stands, etched into the desert itself. Then came the Paracas, weavers of textiles so intricate that even today their patterns challenge modern techniques. The Nazca, who etched enormous geoglyphs across the desert floor. Designs so vast they can only be understood from the sky. The Moche, masters of metal and ceremony, who engineered vast irrigation networks across some of the driest landscapes on Earth. The megalithic builders of Tiwanaku, who shaped stone with a precision that defies explanation even in the modern age. And finally, the Inca, visionaries who carved cities into mountainsides and stitched an empire together with roads reaching across the clouds. This is the Southern story. For generations, mainstream history has insisted on one idea, that these civilizations developed in complete isolation. No contact, no shared ideas, no exchange of knowledge, separate cultures, separate timelines, separate stories. That is the official explanation. But what if that explanation is incomplete? Because when you place these civilizations side by side, when you compare their architecture, their symbols, their mathematics, their astronomy, their sacred geometry, something unexpected begins to emerge. Patterns, echoes, motifs that repeat across thousands of miles, across mountains, across oceans. It is as if cultures separated by impossible distances were speaking the same symbolic language, telling the same cosmic story, remembering the same ancient truth. A hidden continuity begins to rise from the stones, a continuity that mainstream history says cannot exist, yet stands carved into the earth itself. So we must ask the question no one has dared to ask. What if the Olmec, the Maya, the Nazca, the Tiwanaku, and the Inca were not isolated accidents? What if they are chapters of a single global human journey, a journey older, deeper, and more connected than anything we were taught? A story buried beneath the surface, waiting for someone to follow its trail. And today, that voice steps forward, a researcher who has spent more than 30 years traveling across 25 countries, uncovering a pattern hidden in mythology, architecture, indigenous memory, and ancient stone, a timeline that should not exist, yet does. This is the investigation of Kanchipuram Magijnan. This is Best Kept Secrets, and this is where the story begins.
What if everything we've been told about the last civilizations of the Americas is incomplete? What if the Olmecs, the Maya, the Aztecs, the Tiwanaku, and even the Incas were not isolated mysteries, but part of a continuous sacred pattern, a rotating dynasty with roots in ancient India? For over 3 decades, I've traveled across 25 countries as an independent researcher, conducting self-funded field-based research. I've studied archaeology, living traditions, indigenous memory, mythology, architecture, and sacred symbolism to answer one question: what truly happened in the ancient world, and why were these connections hidden? This journey has revealed a pattern that has been in plain sight all along, a global spiritual continuum linking the East and the West, shaped by the wisdom of builders, navigators, healers, and sacred feminine traditions that mainstream history has overlooked. This discovery forms the foundation of my new book series, Best Kept Secrets. Volume 1 is complete and preparing for release. The first of a 5-volume book series that challenges the foundations of mainstream history and restores a story that was never lost, only forgotten. History, as we've been taught, is incomplete. True history isn't a luxury, it's a right. In this video, we begin that journey. All details on pre-orders and release information will be updated in the description below. Let's begin.
True history is not a luxury. It is a fundamental right, and it belongs to everyone. Best Kept Secrets is a 5-volume journey in pursuit of a clearer, deeper understanding of human civilization, beyond inherited timelines and imposed limits, guided by evidence, context, and memory. Volume 1 is being released now. Volume 2 is in its final stages. The journey continues. History should speak your language. We are translating this series and narrating these videos across many languages of the world. If your language is missing, let us know in the comments. Together, let us move closer to true history, little by little. This is Best Kept Secrets. And this is where the story begins.
5 names, 1 riddle: Olmec, Maya, Aztec, Tiwanaku, Inca, pyramids that defy gravity, cities aligned to the stars, symbols that echo across oceans. We were told these worlds were isolated. But what if that story is wrong? What if there's a missing key that makes the impossible inevitable? Independent research presented in Best Kept Secrets Volume 1 points to a hidden connection and one working hypothesis that rewires the timeline. We learned that safe ocean sailing begins late, with Columbus, caravels, and the Age of Discovery. But the artifacts say seafaring mastery is far older. On Indian coins from the first centuries of the Common Era, we see multi-masted ships, icons strong enough to be stamped on currency. No kingdom mints a fantasy. A mast on a coin signals a real industry. Shipyards, pilots, winds, and routes, industries like that take centuries. The ancient Americas show us hardware without the manual, stone cut with surgical precision, cities tuned to the heavens. India preserves software without the factory floor, texts of voyages, calendars, temple engineering, sacred logistics. For centuries, these were treated as separate stories. But what if they are 2 halves of one system? If the Olmec, Maya, Aztec, Tiwanaku, and Inca were sealed off, why do their symbols, city logics, and rituals rhyme with worlds across the ocean? Coincidence or contact? Before answers, the paradox. Civilizations like Caral-Supe in coastal Peru and Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey show monuments before pottery. Not every early culture used ceramics, and some built first, then crafted pots. Maybe our invention ladder is upside down. Maybe the mast, not the pot, came first. Should early transoceanic voyages surprise us? They shouldn't. History class made them sound like an impossible dream until a few centuries ago. But the stones and the shipwrecks tell a different story. The evidence has been in plain sight for millennia. More than 4,000 years ago in the Indus Valley, engineers weren't just building cities, they were carving harbors. The dock at Lothal wasn't a simple pier, it was a tidal basin with wharfs, a backbone for sea trade reaching into Mesopotamia. In the Arabian Sea, during the 3rd millennium BCE, shipwrights stitched massive planks together and sealed the seams with bitumen. Flexible, durable hulls built to ride the monsoon, not just hug the coast. We even have the receipts frozen on the seabed. The Uluburun and Cape Gilidania wrecks are Bronze Age time capsules, standardized copper and tin ingots, glass, ivory, cargo that points to organized long-haul exchange, not occasional barter. And this wasn't only private enterprise. Egyptian voyages to Punt ran as state projects. In temple scenes, we see fleets with masts and sails, crews and provisions, logistics on a scale that makes long-distance sea travel routine rather than experimental. Put it together, engineered docks, ocean-grade hulls, standardized cargo, state-run fleets, and the question isn't whether our ancestors could cross oceans. It's this: where else did they go? What did they accomplish when they landed? What temples rose? What calendars turned? What dynasties took their light? If the sea were a road, then those roads led somewhere into markets and myths, into law and kingship. The record we've met so far is capacity. The record ahead is consequence. Best Kept Secrets, Volume 1 traces that consequence across oceans, testing what moved, who carried it, and why it endured. The details live in the chapters that follow. The voyage continues. State-run voyages with mast, manifest, and provisioning at scale. These are not myths, they are measurements, engineering, provisioning, and standardization. When networks break through earthquake, war, drought, or plague, harbors fall silent, and apprentices vanish. Skills don't die, they lose their stewards. The mast is yearly, widespread, and civilizational. Start with oceans, and maps of influence begin to align. 1200 BCE, several anchors of the eastern Mediterranean system fail in quick succession. Hattusa goes dark. The Hittite Empire collapses. Mycenaean centers burn. Linear B vanishes. Continuity breaks fastest at interfaces, ports, deltas, and caravan nodes. When harbors fail, knowledge disappears from the record. Absence is often interruption, not ignorance. A single epidemic returning in waves erases master-apprentice chains. Add war, famine, and dynastic collapse. Recovery is measured in lifetimes, sometimes millennia. The so-called Sea Peoples around 1250 to 1100 BCE show us that oceans move more than cargo. They move cultures, a living model for how fleets can relocate populations, rituals, and power. If oceans can move nations, could dynasties rotate across them? Independent research presented in Best Kept Secrets, Volume 1, advances a bold answer. Pandyas in Mesoamerica as Olmecs, Maya, and Aztecs. Cholas in the Andes as Tiwanaku and the Incas. Unbelievable? Good. Then let's test it on the sea, on the timeline, and in the stone. Indian coins from the 1st and 2nd centuries CE show 3 masted ships. These were teak-built giants riding monsoons, hauling heavy cargo, even elephants. A mast on a coin is not just a myth, it is brand truth. At Ajanta near Aurangabad in Maharashtra, one fresco from Cave 2, painted in the 5th century CE, shows a 3-masted ocean-going ship. It isn't a myth, it's visual evidence. The Ajanta caves, carved between the 2nd century BCE and the 6th century CE, preserve India's maritime memory in pigment and stone. Indian shipwrights built for blue water teak and jackfruit hulls, reinforced with iron and even steel, engineered to survive monsoon seas and push into transoceanic voyages. And the world noticed. Arab chroniclers themselves acknowledged that Indian ships outmatched their own dhows in durability. The mast is the turning point. A boat becomes a ship the moment wind becomes its engine. With mass and rigging, you can sail upwind by tacking, keep speed on schedule, and carry tonnage safely across blue water. A mast implies a whole industry. Rope walks, sailcloth, riggers, pilots, ports, and maps. That's why a mast shows up on coins and frescoes. It signals not a single voyage, but a system. Where we see 3 masts at Ajanta, we are looking at logistics, not legend. The hardware that lets an ocean become a road. This single image, 3 masts racing from an ancient wall, reminds us that long before later empires claimed the oceans, India had already harnessed wind into a means of transportation. Safe blue water sailing predates Columbus by millennia. In India, dynasties rotate like clockwork. Across the ocean, empires rise as others fall. Not random collapse, transfer. A rotation of dynasties across seas, as if one throne moved between worlds. This working hypothesis is a map of predictions. If the rotation is real, we should find roots, residues, ritual codes, and administrative blueprints crossing in these windows. Ocean's first historical timeline, Pandya Stream, Mesoamerica, and the south coast of Peru. What you're seeing isn't just a row of disconnected cultures, it's a pattern, a stream we read as Pandya lineage memory moving across oceans and centuries. This visual traces cultural sequences from the Olmec in Mesoamerica through Paracas and Nazca in South America, and across the Indian Ocean to Tamil Nadu, home of the Seafaring Pandya dynasty. The line continues to the Aztec, emerging shortly after the Pandya maritime peak. Chola stream, the Andes. The Pandya stream is only half the picture. Their rivals, the Cholas, trace a different relay, alternating between India and the high Andes. In our Andes first working model, the Cholas stream's earliest expression appears in the highlands and Lake Titicaca, Peru and Bolivia, continuing through 100 BCE and overlapping the Chavín horizon. The start date is undetermined, but the terminus at 100 BCE is clear. Our Indian appearance opens in Tamil Nadu from roughly 100 BCE to 250 CE. We open in Tamil Nadu with the early Cholas under Karikala, maritime power, hydraulic ambition, solar regalia. The template is set. Then the center shifts. The sequence continues through the early and later Cholas, aligning with the rise of Tiwanaku, between 250 and 850 CE. From this lineage emerges the Inca Empire, dominant in the Andes until the 16th century. Across murals, coins, and reconstructions, India remembers a maritime industry built in hardwood, rigged for monsoons, scaled for distance. The icon is consistent because the practice was consistent. If ships carry kings, what else crosses? Codes, symbols, governance. If oceans carry goods, they carry governance. Andean and Mesoamerican hierarchies echo India's administrative grammar. Divine rulers, priests, warriors, merchants, artisans, farmers, not copy-paste, but compatible blueprints evolving in dialogue. Boars where boars do not live. Elephant memory where elephants never walked. If this were only trade, we'd expect goods. But what we find are ideas, royal emblems, and sacred grammars crossing oceans. Poetry remembers what ledgers forget. Sangam verses praise captains beyond sight of land, chart monsoons and harbors, and read the heavens. Astronomical lines in Patinapalai match observations vivid from high altitudes like the Andes. Stars don't lie. Sangam Tamil literature and ancient Sanskrit texts remember lands that don't belong to India. They speak of forests, dense and breathless, mountains stepped and cloud-caught, horizons turned toward the setting sun. They name creatures foreign to the subcontinent. Andean owls in sacred night, foxes on cold high plains, monkeys moving through humid canopies. These are not ornaments of verse, they are geographic fingerprints, specific, layered, unmistakable. Together, they sketch worlds that match the Andes and Mesoamerica with unsettling fidelity. The poets didn't know our modern names, but their lines trace the exact contours across the ocean under the same stars. This isn't a conspiracy story, it is interrupted memory. Around the mid-second millennium, CE, deadly illnesses sweep the Andes and Mesoamerica. The argument here, a wider, poorly recorded pandemic reached India too, long enough to hollow institutions, silence harbors, and snap master-apprentice chains. And in sacred statecraft, being a monarch was a risky business. Dynasties protected continuity by restricting access. Knowledge was shared only on a need-to-know basis. When dynasties fell, knowledge chains collapsed, the threads were cut, not destroyed, and into that fragile silence, new empires entered. Even at the peak of expansion, Tamils lived in Tamil Nadu, farming, trading, and composing, while others ventured abroad. Sangam poetry evokes images of imports, long voyages, and longing, a dual presence across oceans, home and away. Step back, and the fragments fall into place. The Olmecs, the Mayas, the Aztecs, Tiwanaku, and the Incas. Not isolated mysteries, but Tamil dynasties abroad. The Pandyas in Mesoamerica, the Cholas in the Andes. Their ships crossed oceans, carrying rulers, rituals, and knowledge. Now, for the first time, we can tell our children we know who they were. The mystery has names, dates, and dynasties. We finally have an answer, and we are glad the truth has come into the light. The question isn't whether our worlds were connected, it is whether we are ready for what that connection reveals.
Today, we've only scratched the surface of the evidence connecting the Americas to a rotating dynasty from ancient India. These are paradigm-shifting claims. They don't rest on opinion, they rest on archaeology, living traditions, sacred feminine wisdom, and a global pattern that has been hiding in plain sight. You are no longer just a viewer. By watching this, you become part of a mission to reclaim a history that was never lost, only forgotten. The whole body of evidence for this first phase of the journey is in my new book, Best Kept Secrets, Volume 1, Hidden in Plain Sight. If you believe, as I do, that true history isn't a luxury, it's a right, then I need you to do two things right now. Subscribe to this channel and like this video. That tells the algorithm to show this evidence to more people. Visit bestkeptsecrets.life to join the insider email list and receive all official pre-order and release details. Please also comment below with your thoughts. Your voice helps this mission grow. Together, let's reclaim the history that belongs to us all. I'll see you in the following video.